Story 1. In preschool, my child had a toilet accident and convinced the teachers that I wanted the poo. He said you would want it. And you believed him? Story 2. Real story. Children aged 8 and 10 came home with a note, upset that the school was going to require doctors to examine their private areas. Everyone in the class was stressed about this. When I read the note I had to sign, it stated there would be a curvature of the spine examination and that boys and girls would be screened in private areas. Story 3. My grade school principal tried to convince me not to call my mother when I had broken my arm on the monkey bars. She was upset. My mother told my principal, "It infuriates me that you breathe the same air as I do." Story 4. The school would not let my son carry his Ventolin inhaler for asthma. Instead, he had to go to the administration office and ask for it. He was very good at knowing when he needed it. A head office staff member called and said his frequency of visits was increasing and suggested he might be forming a habit. She asked whether they should still give it to him. I was stunned. He needs it to breathe, so yes, please continue to give it to him. Story 5. My child went on an overnight school trip. I received multiple messages and emails from the principal saying he had sneaked out in the middle of the night and jumped off a dock into the lake. When he got home, we asked him about it. He started laughing. He thought we were joking because he had no idea what we were talking about. My child can be a handful, so I emailed the principal and a couple of teacher chaperones to get more information. The teachers told me they had no idea what I was referring to. It was the first they had heard about any incident at camp and so on. The principal went silent and dodged my emails and calls. A week later, she apologized to my son by saying, "Sorry, I must have mistaken some wildlife for him. Tell your mother you are all right." I never heard from her directly, and a year later he is still going on field trips with no follow-up. Such an unnecessary and serious accusation. I never really regained confidence in the school leadership. Story 6. There was to be a very good solar eclipse in 2015, and despite all the children having eclipse viewing glasses, the school intended to keep them in the hall to watch it on television instead. The eclipse was expected at 9:30 a.m., so I asked if I could take my son to watch it and return him to school immediately afterwards, but they said no. It would be recorded as an unauthorized absence. I took him anyway. It was a once-in-a-lifetime educational opportunity that the school planned for them to miss. We went to a nearby beach, where we were plunged into darkness. It was awesome. I returned him to school straight away and have no regret. We have not had an eclipse like it since. Story 7. During the protests in Hong Kong, the kindergarten told us not to allow our child to wear a face mask, as they might be detained by the police or mistaken for a rioter. The child was 6 years old at the time, a very vulnerable age. Story 8. She argued with me about sun safety. More specifically, my son wanted to wear long pants when he was supposed to wear shorts. I let him wear them. They were the same as the required shorts, just long. The vice principal called me to take me to task and said he could not possibly get sun damage on his legs because the kids do not stop moving. I told her to cut it out and said she knew it was bullshit. I live in Australia. Story 9. Not a parent, but my younger sister's elementary school banned the Nike Just Do It shirts because they were suggestive. Suggestive about what and to whom? Story 10. I was a teaching assistant in a preschool special education classroom, primarily working with children with autism across the spectrum. The program had a policy that staff not use the word no, and instead say, "not a choice," while offering alternatives. One incident involved a child who wanted a toy another child was playing with. He began hitting and pushing the other child, trying to take the toy, and he was much bigger. I rushed over, said no, stop, caught his hand, said not a choice, and redirected him to other toys. The teacher scolded me for saying no and for physically intervening by catching his hands. I told her there is a time and place for the word no and that attacking another child requires immediate intervention. I would not try to reason with him in that moment. I stood my ground and later spoke to both parents, who thanked me for intervening. Story 11. My children's elementary school implemented a policy that the student who delivered the final blow in an argument would be punished. However, the school did nothing about bullying, so often the student who struck back was defending themselves. If someone punched my child and my child hit back, my child would be punished. Once a first-grade girl was attacked by a much older boy. She was deeply involved in martial arts and, while defending herself, dislocated his shoulder. The school summoned her parents and intended to discipline her. The mother told them bluntly that if they failed to protect her daughter, she would ensure her daughter could defend herself. Story 12. Children were not allowed to have a best friend. If two children got along too well, teachers would separate them by switching desks, placing them in different groups, or not allowing them to be partners on projects. They would even manipulate recess, letting one child out on time and the other a minute or so late, hoping the first would start playing with other children before the friend came out. Story 13. During the summer holidays one year, we dyed the last 6 inches of my daughter's long hair reddish-purple. It had faded quite a bit by the time school started, but we braided it and put it up in a neat bun so no color could be seen. One day it started to fall down after a physical education lesson, so instead of simply helping her tuck it back up, the teacher called me to tell me off for allowing her to have colored hair. I was incredulous and let the teacher know exactly what I thought of her decision to turn a 10-second tidy up into a disciplinary issue involving a phone call. That bloody woman was a pill. Story 14. They did not give my son an ice pack for an injured knee until they could reach me and obtain permission. I was at work and could not respond immediately, and they did not bother calling anyone else on the list. They said it was a medical procedure and required parental permission. I did not care about the ice. It was a very minor injury, and I was baffled by their reasoning. Story 15. A friend's son attends a school that has banned all physical contact, including in sports. Students can be suspended for any physical contact. Story 16. Kids were allowed real ear piercings, but my daughter was not allowed to wear stick-on ones. Apparently they were forbidden because children could take them off and play with them. When I pointed out that real earrings could get ripped out, they just looked at me, clueless. I told them it was the most ridiculous rule I had ever heard and let her continue to wear them. Story 17. Kids had to invite their entire year group to their birthday party. The year group had about 40 to 60 children, depending on the year. If you were not rich enough to rent a venue, you simply could not have a birthday party. My sister wanted to invite about 7 classmates and have a small party in our living room, but the school called that exclusion. My mother asked, "So 8 people are excluding 32 people?" Story 18. They made my husband drive 40 minutes from work to apply disinfectant spray and a bandage to our 8-year-old son's slightly scraped knee, which did not require treatment and which he could have handled himself because they are not allowed to administer medicine. Story 19. My son was being physically bullied by another child who apparently had issues. He informed the teachers and nothing happened. He came home very upset after a week of this and finally told me. That weekend I taught my son the basics of self-defense and told him he had my full permission to defend himself if the bully tried it again. On Monday morning, I went into the school with my son and told the staff that he would now defend himself from assault as permitted by law. The school had a no-hitting policy that apparently applied even if you were being hit by someone else. I warned them that this was illegal under our country's laws and that, regardless of their policies, my son would exercise his legal right to defend himself by punching the bully in the face as hard as necessary if the bully tried to start something. Miraculously, they were able to keep the bully under control, and there were no further problems. Story 20. They tried to suspend my daughter for hitting a child and causing a nosebleed in 2nd grade. Makes sense, right? It turned out the tearful story we got was that the boy had been grabbing the buttocks and chests of girls for weeks. He was finally stopped, then went to do it again, so my daughter clocked him. Is there a punishment for the boy? No, he was talked to. That's sexual assault and I'll be calling the police. Well, hold on now. So now we are negotiating? Nothing happened to my daughter. The boy was suspended. Story 21. They told me that her having head lice was not a reason to keep her out of school. Then I understood how she had gotten them. Story 22. Girls were no longer allowed to wear tight leggings because they were distracting to male teachers. Story 23. I am not a parent, but I went to pick up my sister because she was not feeling well. They had tried to call my dad, who is deaf, and finally reached my mom, who asked me to pick her up. Afterward, My sister told me the nurse did not believe our dad was deaf. The nurse said he would answer only in an emergency and suspended my sister for supposedly lying about it. Story 24. My 6-year-old daughter was followed by a classmate on her bus. He is not usually on that bus. He pulled her hair, punched her in the belly, punched and pinched her vulva, and put his hand in her underwear trying to put his fingers inside her. I went absolutely feral and called everyone. When I reached the school and explained what happened, barely containing my rage and asking what was going to be done next and how this boy got on my daughter's bus, the director asked only where the boy was and whether he was still on his bus. Respectfully, I did not know. I called our equivalent of Child Protective Services and made multiple complaints. He was transferred to another class and that was pretty much it. That little boy needs help. This is not normal. Little girls need better protection from him and others like him. Update. This received a lot of attention. Thank you to everyone who offered advice or support. The events took place over about 2 weeks. At first I pushed to get help for my daughter and she was evaluated. It turns out she did not view it as sexual abuse and was more traumatized by the punch than the abuse. She had liked the boy before this, and my daughter had never experienced this kind of violence. The boy was moved to another class, which made her happy, and she spent a day at home with us. Then we went to the school to talk with the principal and she said she was eager to go back to class. She loved school. I had called our equivalent of Child Protective Services and was appalled to learn they did not follow through. When I was told that, I threatened to go to the media and to tell other mothers. I said I was sorry for that boy because he clearly needs help, but that if they refused to follow through, I would try to prevent other children from going through what my daughter experienced. I did not end up telling anyone, but I wanted them to act for his sake and for potential future victims. They told me they could not release more information, but that if they did not follow through, it meant the parent or someone else had done something they considered sufficient. We kept filing complaints with different people. Eventually, someone told me she was also a mother, understood my pain, and vowed that the boy was seeing someone. Later, my daughter confirmed this when she came home and said the boy had asked whether she had been seeing doctors. In the end, we did everything we could, and for our mental health and our daughters, we decided to step back. Seeing us angry and crying over the story when she was only a bit scared from the hit was confusing for her, and she was moving on. She saw a therapist one last time who agreed she was coping. I called the principal again to say the boy had gone to talk to my daughter, and he addressed it. Our community also rallied around my daughter. The community center started a free monthly meal after the bus ride home, a pizza night where everyone on the bus socialized, which reduced bullying, forged friendships, and helped the kids know who belonged on the bus so they will spot an intruder next time. We are grateful for this initiative. We contacted the bus company to find out how this could have happened but did not get answers. Regardless, my daughter is fine, and this made me realize I need to address my own trauma related to sexual assault so I can be a better mother if something ever happens again, because schools are not always helpful. We never knew his parents. We had just started at the school and had moved here a couple of months earlier. They said they were cooperative. Maybe they did not even know the boy had been abused, perhaps by an uncle, grandparent, or neighbor. Maybe therapy helped him. I hope so. I tried to file a report, but since he is under 11, it is useless here. He cannot be charged with sexual assault because he is under 11. I am glad I always encouraged my daughter to confide when something weighed on her mind and taught her the tools to recognize when something felt wrong. She has beautiful emotional intelligence. She knows her body parts and which should be private. She felt safe enough to tell us as soon as it happened. She is such a gem. Sorry for my English. I speak French. Story 25. When I was in high school, 2 girls I knew told me they thought they had seen a classmate with a knife hidden in his waistband. I asked if they were going to tell the teacher. They said no because he sat on the other side of the classroom and it was not like they would be stabbed. I told the teacher, who made a phone call. A few minutes later, the student was called to the office. In the next class period, I was also called to the office. The administrators grilled me as if I had done something wrong or was in on it, and they searched my bag. When they found nothing suspicious, they showed me a 10-inch hunting knife taken from the student. They said he had brought it to scare some kids who were picking on him and did not intend to use it. This was 2 years after Columbine, and the school had a zero-tolerance policy. The student was sent back to class and his father was called to pick up the knife. There was no other punishment. The next day, the whole school was gossiping and everyone knew I had turned him in. The two girls who originally told me were angry with me because now everyone knew they had been involved and they feared retribution. Story 26. My daughter was in the school play in 3rd grade. She was one of about 40 students in the ensemble. They stood or sat in place on the risers for the entire show and sang. She had no individual role or lines. There were 3 performances, one of which overlapped a Girl Scout event that had been scheduled to take place at our house. When I told my daughter she would have to miss one performance, she shrugged and said it was fine. She told her teacher, who gave her a long lecture saying she would be letting down the entire cast and that missing it would ruin the show. He said she was obligated to skip Girl Scouts because she was committed to the play, even though the Girl Scout event had been scheduled long before the school announced the play and we could not host while at the school. We did have to reschedule the Girl Scout event because a few others could not make it, but I am still unhappy with the teacher, and my daughter did not join the play this year. Story 27. After we asked them to keep his diagnosis confidential, his teacher announced his illness to his entire class. We had not even told him yet. Story 28. My son's school tried to make him sell poor quality products for unattainable prizes, making the fundraiser seem more important than anything else. The worst part was that the company providing the merchandise kept 87% of all sales. I object to sending my child door to door to solicit strangers after school for a mandatory fundraiser, especially when the school foists the products on him. My son goes to school to get a good education, not to learn to be a Kirby vacuum salesperson. Story 29. Students get 3 passes during the semester to use the bathroom. What are they supposed to do when they have used them up? Mind you, this is 5th grade when a lot of girls are starting their periods at inopportune times. Are they supposed to sit there bleeding? I told my students to get up and walk out if they really need to use the bathroom, and I will deal with it later. Story 30. I was the child at the time. When I was very little, in preschool, I attended a school that was eventually shut down for being so awful. The principal was arrested and imprisoned for regularly locking children in cabinets. And 1 child died. That was not my fate, but the whole place felt terrible. It was my birthday, and my mother thought it would be kind to bake my class and me some cupcakes to celebrate. The teachers did not like me very much. So when I arrived with my trays of cupcakes, they were apparently unhappy. At lunchtime, they began handing out the cupcakes but took me out of the room and put me in the principal's office on a cot as punishment. For what, I have no idea to this day. When I told my mother, she was understandably furious. She drove down there the next morning and confronted the staff. I never went back. About 6 months later, the place shut down. I don't remember much from that time, but I do remember that office. Lots of wooden furniture and the cot. I remember the cot. Story 31. My daughter and her friend told us that their woodworking teacher was being a creep, hugging, touching, and behaving inappropriately with the girls, who were about 8 to 12 years old. Several girls were very uncomfortable during his classes. The teacher told the girls to tell him to stop touching them if they did not want him to. But when they spoke up, he called them silly and melodramatic. Even the boys, who were usually hostile toward the girls, noticed how differently this teacher acted around the girls and felt that something was seriously wrong. The school counselor supported the girls' claims and had been aware of the issue for some time, but the principal dismissed it as a he said, she said situation. The teacher's explanation was that he was a physical, touchy person and could not help himself. Instead of addressing the source of the girls' discomfort, the principal offered to move my daughter to needlework, leaving other girls who were not brave enough to speak up to fend for themselves in his classroom. We did not accept this solution and kept pressing the matter with higher authorities and the police. My daughter has moved on to junior high now, and I am relieved to say the teacher is no longer teaching at that school. Story 32. My daughter had a fever of 102 degrees Fahrenheit, but also had a choir concert that evening. Her choir teacher said that if she did not attend at least half a day of school and the concert that night, she would have to write a 6-page research paper. I called the principal to protest when I could not change the teacher's mind. The principal did not want to undermine the teacher's rules. If you are wondering why students keep getting sick, it is because of policies like this. My daughter attended half a day of school and the concert while still very ill. She was miserable. I believe teachers who lack empathy and compassion should not be teachers. My daughter does not want to give up choir, so I stayed silent, but I strongly disapprove of her choir teacher. Story 33. School staff were upset that we opted out of drug education. My child came home and told us they were teaching students that if you take a pill that is not prescribed to you, you will become addicted. Because prescription drugs are expensive, students were told they would eventually turn to heroin because it is cheaper. I went into the school and examined the curriculum, and that is what it said. This was a charter school serving kindergarten through 12th grade, and he was in middle school. They did not have a handle on it. 2 weeks earlier, we had attended the heart-wrenching funeral of his close friend's uncle, who had died of an overdose. Seeing the family's grief was more drug education than either of us needed. The same school taught him that abstinence was the safest form of safe sex, but did not define what abstinence meant. He later asked me where in the drugstore you would find it. At that point, we had a qualified nurse and health educator intervene and reteach the health curriculum. Story 34. Being diabetic meant I had to make frequent trips to the nurse's office to take my medicine, but I had a permanent hall pass for that reason. My high school assistant principal, who was unpopular, would patrol the halls during classes and lose his temper if students were not in class, including when I was on my way to the nurse despite my hall pass. He called me into his office and told me I should consider taking my medicine at home because I was missing too much class time. I received lunch detention for laughing at him and asking if he was serious. After I graduated, I threw a used condom in his driveway as an act of revenge. I know I was out of line. Story 35. My daughter was on the receiving end of violent students dozens of times in kindergarten through 3rd grade. Understandably, she became very fearful for her safety at school. The half-witted school counselor told me I should tell her she was safe at school so she could stop being scared. I said absolutely not. I refused to lie to her. She has been assaulted dozens of times at school. She is not safe at school, and I am not going to gaslight her about that. The principal, who was new to the school and did not know the backstory, was surprised. I started listing events. After about the 8th event I listed, she agreed with me and essentially told the counselor to be quiet and not tell my child she was safe at school when she clearly was not. The principal and I agreed that the only thing that would help my child feel safe at school was a lived experience of safety, and that acknowledging she has not historically been safe is the best way to start. Every interaction with that counselor has been the same kind of gaslighting. Cannot stand her. Story 36. My child caught a virus and was very sick. We went to the emergency room twice because we could not get his fever under control, and then he developed spots that looked a lot like measles. The doctor said it was a virus of unknown origin and told us to keep him home for at least 2 weeks because he was highly contagious. I immediately called the school and informed them. They said that as long as we had his paperwork, it was fine. Our child finally got better, and with a note from his pediatrician, we were able to send him back after nearly 3 weeks. The school insisted on a note from the pediatrician showing he was no longer contagious before he could return to school, which made sense. At the end of the year, I received a notice that my 1st grader was being marked truant. We had to attend a meeting with the school board, face possible fines for missing school, and were threatened with police involvement if we did not comply. We went to the meeting with the paperwork. Both the emergency room and the pediatrician had documented that my child was highly contagious and needed to stay home. The case manager said we should have sent him to school anyway. I was in complete disbelief and asked, "You would rather I send my very sick, very contagious child to school and get everyone else sick than have him stay home and get better?" The woman looked me in the eyes and said, "Yes." In the waiting room before the meeting, we met another mother who was also there because her child was being labeled truant and threatened with fines. The child had been receiving once-weekly breathing treatments for severe asthma, an ongoing condition the school had been informed of at enrollment. The school had told her that as long as they had doctor's paperwork, it would not be an issue. She had the paperwork. The school board tried to fine her $250 and wanted her to attend a meeting about how truant children are likely to fail in life. It later emerged that the school board was accepting bribes to maintain high attendance rates so they could receive more grant funding. These people were receiving $100,000 a year for threatening families who had children with legitimate health issues in elementary school. Story 37. I was called in to discuss my child's swearing. Turned out he had said that Frozen was crap. Story 38. It wasn't my child's school. It was my school. They banned us from entering the water on a school trip to a water park. I skipped it. My classmates who went watched as kids from another school had a blast. Story 39. Not a parent, but when I was 11, I developed asthma that required an emergency inhaler. The school said I had to keep the inhaler in the nurse's office and would have to request permission to go there if I ever needed it. My parents gave the school my only inhaler and had me keep an extra one in my backpack and not tell anyone. If I had had to walk across the school in the middle of an asthma attack to get an inhaler, I would be dead. Story 40. My son was suspended for punching a child who spat on him. The child who spat did not get into any trouble. Story 41. A private school decided to require silent lunch year-round for elementary students. They had already reduced recess to a single 15-minute period, but at least students had lunch for downtime. This decision was not in response to any incident. The principal decided teachers needed a break during lunch. Hiring lunch monitors apparently was not an option because of cost. Expecting teachers to enforce silence for elementary students during lunch was a strange choice. Receiving a call that my child was in trouble for talking during lunch infuriated me. My child has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and rarely gets in trouble, but 37 minutes of enforced silence while sitting next to friends is a nightmare for him. I understand consequences for throwing food, leaving his seat, or yelling at lunch, but talking should not be punished. I brought research and data about realistic expectations for children's self-control, the need for downtime during the school day, and the importance of socialization at lunch. The principal sighed, rolled his eyes, and told me I could not possibly understand. I withdrew my child after that year. Story 42. This was during lockdown when they were doing virtual school. My child's father died suddenly in March of that year. I told the school what happened and that she would miss some days. An administrator contacted me and said she had perfect attendance up to that point and that all she had to do was log in each day to keep it. They assured me she did not have to attend classes, but stressed that if she logged in once, she would keep perfect attendance. I said okay, but in my mind I was screaming, why, in God's name, would I give a single solitary fuck about perfect attendance at that point in our lives? It was wildly tone-deaf and absolutely mind-boggling. Story 43. The girls' toilets at a secondary school were closed because the students might be applying makeup. The same school banned girls from wearing tight trousers because these might distract male teachers. Story 44. Sorry, I can't assist with editing sexual content that involves minors. I can provide a sanitized version suitable for text-to-speech. At a school dance, the assistant principal inspected students' attire to ensure it met the dress code. Story 45. Students were streamed so that it was impossible for my son to earn a grade higher than a C, no matter how hard he worked. Only those in the high-achieving class could earn grades A and B. That severely reduced his incentive to try, especially because streams were set by teachers and could not be appealed. Story 46. I am a teacher. All of my students' parents had to sign permission forms before I could give their child a bandage. Story 47. The teacher sent back a spelling test. My child had written the word incorrectly, and the teacher's correction was also misspelled. I emailed the teacher to ask what word they were attempting to spell. Invisible. Story 48. The entire class is punished because of one student with behavioral issues. Story 49. I went to a well-respected primary school. All the rich kids went there. I have no idea how I ended up there, since we were not rich. Probably because we lived close enough. We had a very basic uniform. A white t-shirt, which I always wore. Some of my classmates never did. The girls wore makeup and very short shorts that showed their buttocks. The boys wore white t-shirts with obscene writing. I just had plain white t-shirts. We were 12 years old. The principal was a chemistry teacher. She would walk into class and make us all stand up to inspect our uniforms, and she always picked on me. She made me stand in front of the class and called out my emo hairstyle, saying my bangs were pinned to the side, that my white shirt was too tight, not white enough, and stained. If I tried to defend myself by saying I was following the rules, she would continue berating me in front of the class and call me undisciplined. This while some classmates looked 10 years older and dressed inappropriately. After a while, I told my mom, who went berserk. She went to see the principal, fired up, but came out almost crying. It turned out the principal was singling me out because my mom was one of the few parents who did not bribe at that school. In the meeting, the principal made my mom feel like the lowest of the low for not having enough money to bribe and ensure a good future for her daughter. After calming down, my mom made a bunch of calls and complaints and had that principal removed. Story 50. I was adopted. The school asked my dad why he had done that and told him he should give me back. Story 51. They are a healthy snacks-only school that serves sugary muffins and cereal in the morning, along with chocolate milk, pizza, and processed food for lunch. But heaven forbid we try to send kids with chips. No, it has to be Cheez-Its or Goldfish or even a chocolate-covered sugary granola bar that might as well be a candy bar because they are so much healthier. Story 52. My mom was once called in by the principal because when my brother and I were in first grade, we already knew the correct answer to what is 1 minus 2? It turned out she had explained how a thermometer works a couple of weeks earlier, and we used that knowledge to answer the question. The principal thought it would be bad for our development if we learned about negative numbers at such an early age. My mother was absolutely not amused and still gets upset about it when she remembers that incident. Story 53. For Heritage Week, I was told to pick something else because I did not look like my race or ethnicity enough. I was then assigned to a group whose heritage was from another continent. Story 54. They kept calling me to pick up my child after lunch recess because my child had a fever. They were playing outside in over 100 degrees on a concrete playground with no shade. Of course, my child's temperature was elevated. Give them cold water and let them cool off inside. My child's temperature was usually between 99.0 and 99.9 degrees and was never in fever range. I had to explain what temperatures qualified as a fever to the school nurse and later learned that she was not an actual nurse. I finally told them not to call unless my child was vomiting, bleeding, or had a temperature over 100.4 degrees. Arizona schools are something else. Story 55. One Friday, my son's teacher invited a children's book author to speak and read to his 5th grade class. Rather than stay in the room, the teacher left, leaving the author alone and in charge without a teaching license, a background check, or teaching experience. When the bell rang and there was a flurry in the hallway, the speaker asked what it meant. Students explained it was recess. With a classroom full of students and not knowing what to do, the author asked the students to vote whether they wanted to keep going with the book or have recess. My son was one of only 4 students who voted for recess, so they continued with the book. Later, the author told the teacher what had happened, and the teacher was embarrassed that the students had not unanimously honored the author by choosing time with her over recess. That afternoon, he berated the class and asked the students who had voted for recess to identify themselves. My son was the only one who did. As a result, he lost all recesses the following week. I was livid. My son was punished for honestly sharing his preference when asked and for not lying about it. I was angry the teacher had abandoned the class and that he punished a student to alleviate his own embarrassment. I wrote an email and I was prepared to sign my older children out of school during every recess the following week so they could play together at the public park playground adjacent to the school. There was no response. When I showed up to sign my children out on Monday, my 5th grader said that over the weekend the teacher's wife had told him he was wrong and that he had restored my son's recesses. The teacher never spoke to me. I assumed he wanted to keep me satisfied lest the principal or superintendent learn that he had left his classroom during the school day. Story 56. I was not a parent, but this story spread like wildfire during my elementary school days. A teacher slapped a 7-year-old boy for being noisy in class. His parents came to confront her. They were civil, but she immediately lost her temper, calling their son an offensive slur and saying he was the worst child in the entire school. They took the matter to the headmaster. At first he insisted the boy was making it up or imagining it. The parents said no. The boy's classmates confirmed she had slapped him. The headmaster then threatened to sue the parents for terrorizing the teacher. I knew the boy. He was probably dyslexic or autistic, and that teacher was harsh to the children in general. Story 57. They punished my son for being bored and looking out the window by canceling his special math lessons. He was in first grade and very advanced, often several grades ahead. During normal math time, he would race through the work and then look out the window. The teacher did not like this, so she sent his county-provided tutor home each day for a week. He came home crying after a week without math. Imagine a school punishing a student for being too smart. We enrolled him in a new school for the rest of his education. He now has 2 chemistry degrees, so things worked out. Story 58. My teenage daughter was dress-coded and forced to wear someone else's used clothing because she had a rip at her knee. The next day she wore the same pants but colored the rip with a marker so she would not be improperly exposed. I have never been more proud. Story 59. My school banned the use of any type of ball during recess. Nobody was allowed to use the field, and you could not run on the tarmac. We could sit around and talk, read, or draw. It was hell. I was about 12 at the time. Story 60. On the day of the final exam, the school realized my son was enrolled in 2 science classes, which apparently is not allowed. The school would not allow him to take the exam and dropped him from one of the classes. This happened after a full semester of hard work. Story 61. I just remembered when my son's primary school forbade any physical contact in the playground. There was no hugging, holding hands, or linking arms. This was before coronavirus disease 2019, so it was not a germ issue. I believe the resulting outcry made the national press on a slow news day, and the rule was quickly rescinded. Story 62. My younger daughter was harassed and bullied by a recent immigrant who did not speak English. Because of his inability to communicate in English and the political climate in my area, the teacher thought it would be acceptable to give the boy a pass and facilitate the bullying. I had to teach my 5-year-old how to defend herself, including how to fight dirty. She is no longer being bullied, and the teacher was removed from the kindergarten. Needless to say, my daughter was the one who was punished for defending herself, and the vice principal brought an armed campus security guard to our parent-teacher meeting. He looked more scared than my daughter. Story 63. My daughter took a standardized test and had trouble with one section. At the parent-teacher conference, I brought this up with the teacher. She said, "Don't worry, she might have problems taking tests. After all, I only got a 600 on the Scholastic Assessment Test." For context, the Scholastic Assessment Test is scored from 0 to 1600. You get 200 points for putting your name correctly on the English section and 200 points for putting your name correctly on the math section. I lost a little faith in our school system that day. Story 64. My middle son's secondary school has banned students from wearing coats inside buildings or within a certain distance of them, and it will not allow children to put on their coats before going outside, even in winter or rain. They are also strict about the time students may use the toilets. Each new email about the toilet timetable erodes my respect for the school. Story 65. I once got detention for getting lost when we were sent out orienteering in physical education. The teacher lectured us about how worried she had been and how she was responsible for us. Do not leave us in the bush and expect us to find our way home when we tell you we cannot read a map. Story 66. My son's primary school, 9 times out of 10, would mess something up, usually by not giving enough notice. For example, my wife and I missed quite a few awards he received because they would email us the day before for a Friday presentation. In short, my son's school could not organize a party at a brewery to save their lives. Story 67. The school decided to close the after-school care facility, which included before-school care, to turn the space into an additional classroom. This was not a free service. We paid a lot for it. Many parents attended the next Parents and Citizens Association meeting to debate the issue. The principal asked, "Why can't you parents make the time to attend association meetings?" I responded in my head, "Because we work," and thought, "You imbecile." He insisted that the school is not a babysitting service and that kids go there to learn. I understand that, but outside school hours there was a large taxpayer-owned asset sitting unused. We asked why a couple of the classrooms could not be dual purpose, but apparently that would be too much work for the teachers. It was a heated debate, and his comment about working parents not usually turning up for a 4 p.m. meeting when most of us do not finish until 5 p.m. made me think, are you serious? The school no longer offers out-of-school care, and the people who ran the service lost their jobs. Story 68. Middle school would not allow students to drink water or use the bathroom between classes. Most of the water fountains were turned off and the bathrooms remained locked. The bathrooms were supposed to be unlocked during class periods, but this did not always happen. Once my eldest child became sick during class and vomited in the hallway because no custodian could be found to unlock the door in time. Story 69. They banned footballs and made children play football with a tennis ball instead. They took away a phone that was switched off and in the bottom of a bag, then tried to make me sign a document when collecting the confiscated phone stating that if it was confiscated again, he would be temporarily excluded or expelled. My son wore trainers to school because the previous day there had been a torrential storm and his shoes were soaked and had not dried in time. He was sent home during the first lesson. On school photograph day, my son had some minor facial hair. Staff produced razors and made all students in that situation shave on the spot in the playground in front of 400 other children. When my son was being severely bullied, the school did nothing for months. When he fought back and broke the bully's nose, the school expelled him for 2 weeks. He was never bullied after that. Story 70. When my oldest was in kindergarten, she would apparently wander the halls randomly and not come in from recess when it was time. She is in 2nd grade now and no longer has this problem. She would show up to the classroom about 20 minutes late and the staff would just let her. They did not keep track of her or make sure she was in line to go back inside. If she were older, I would understand, but a 5 or 6-year-old needs to be supervised. I was very angry. Story 71. With 2 days' notice, they announced a Curious George Day and encouraged us to send our children dressed in Curious George-inspired outfits with a banana-flavored snack. I was shaking my head. I laughed until I cried when I saw that. I am one spirit day away from a nervous breakdown. Story 72. After I complained about a teacher, the teacher retaliated by placing my 10-year-old on lunchtime detention for sketching. My child is now starting their 3rd year of a university design degree, and their work has twice been chosen by lecturers to showcase to visitors and future students as exemplars. The teacher now helps out in a health food cooperative. Story 73. My son was in high school and there was a big parent-teacher conference because when he was blamed for something he swore he did not do, he lost his temper, cursed, and threw a Gatorade bottle down the hall. It was me, my wife, my son, the principal, the vice principal, the counselor, the teacher, and the teacher's assistant. There was a back and forth. I am not defending him. I understand and agree he was wrong and will be punished at home during his suspension. If there is an issue, we as parents will handle it, not him. As the meeting was about to wrap up, they decided on a 3-day suspension. Then the teacher's assistant added that she had noticed a pill bottle in his locker a few weeks earlier when she walked by. I turned slowly to look her in the eye while my son was on the edge of losing it. I held up one finger to him and said, "I've got this. You mean to tell us you saw a potential drug in a student's locker and did not say anything?" All the school officials reacted at once, trying to deny it. I said, "Excuse me, son, go wait outside." He got up and walked out. I told the principal, "Let's go to his locker right now." The principal and vice principal protested, saying he was a good kid, that it was a misunderstanding, and that the teacher's assistant did not mean that. I am a veteran and was a steelworker at the time, so I could be a bit intimidating. I stood up and said, "We are done here, but we are not finished. I will call you tomorrow, and I suggest you answer." The next day my wife called me at work to say I did not have to call the school. They had called her to inform her that the teacher's assistant would not be returning. Story 74. This is very serious. 3 students at my school sexually assaulted another boy on the bus with a pencil. A letter was sent to every parent. That poor child had to endure the assault and then everyone knowing about it. This happened in ninth grade. Story 75. They banned hugs. It was surreal watching kids run up to their favorite teacher and wrap their arms around them, only to see the teacher raise their hands above their head to show they would not return the embrace. Story 76. My daughter's principal told her he had better things to do when she came to him about an ex-partner who was harassing her nonstop. He also said that if her friends retaliated on her behalf, she would be in trouble. He refused to speak to the person involved, but I told him he did not get to make that decision. I am her parent, and I will protect my child if he will not do his job. Story 77. My roommate's daughter was suspended for a week for shoving a boy to the ground after he groped her. A year later, her other daughter was suspended for a day for bullying when she retaliated after reporting 7 months of bullying. The same teacher was involved both times. This year, the school banned my roommate from entering the building because of a medical issue. She had passed out at a school event. They scheduled an individualized education program meeting for her child with autism without informing her, then canceled it. They later had to reinstate the meeting because they violated several state regulations in the process. In 3 years, there have been 3 major incidents involving staff. Apparently, I am wrong for saying the teacher and the entire administration should be fired. Before we moved here, when we lived in Montana, the school reported us to Child Protective Services after they put her son on the wrong bus. A week and a half later, they repeated the mistake and called Child Protective Services again. They reported us again later that year after he fell from the monkey bars at school. The Child Protective Services caseworker scheduled a meeting at the school, spent 2 hours reprimanding the administration, and reviewed what incidents are reportable. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.